The first thing Commander Riven Voss registered upon waking was the scent. Dry spice, ozone, and something faintly floral, like night-blooming jasmine crushed under armored boots. His head throbbed as if a plasma grenade had detonated inside his skull, and his mouth tasted like scorched metal. He blinked against the harsh desert sun filtering through the thick, sand-colored fabric of a military tent. Not his tent. The air hummed with unfamiliar energy signatures, and the ground beneath him vibrated with the distant rumble of engines. Alien engines. He tried to sit up, but a heavy weight pinned his right arm. He turned his head slowly, dreading what he'd find. Beside him lay a woman. Not just any woman. She was tall even lying down, her limbs long and sculpted like marble carved by a god who favored warriors. Her skin was the palest white, almost luminous against the coarse desert blanket, and her hair, thick, silken, and the color of molten gold, spilled across the pillow like spilled sunlight. She wore a form-fitting battle tunic of deep indigo, open at the collar to reveal smooth collarbones and the faint scar of an old plasma burn. Her face was serene in sleep, high cheekbones and a sharp jaw softened by the curve of her lips. One hand rested lightly on his chest, possessive even in slumber. Riven froze. He'd seen her before on battlefield holos in intelligence briefs in nightmares. General Sari's Val of the Ketheri Dominion. The woman who'd commanded the fleet that shattered the Third Terran Armada over Xylos Prime. The enemy. He tried to pull away, but the motion stirred her. Her eyelids fluttered open, revealing eyes the color of storm clouds over a frozen sea. Pale gray, intelligent, and utterly unamused. She didn't startle, didn't reach for a weapon. She simply studied him, one eyebrow arching slowly, as if he were a mildly interesting insect that had crawled onto her breakfast tray. "Good morning, husband," she said, her voice low and smooth, with the faintest lilt that made every syllable sound like a blade being drawn from its sheath. Riven's stomach dropped. "What did you call me?" "Husband." She sat up, stretching with feline grace, the muscles in her back shifting beneath her pale skin. "Unless you've forgotten the terms of the Accord of Twin Moons. Or perhaps your concussion has scrambled your memory along with your tactical sense." "Accord of Twin Moons?" Riven's voice cracked. He scrambled off the cot, stumbling over a discarded boot, his own, and whirled to face her. "I don't remember signing any accord. I don't remember marrying you." Sari sighed, as if explaining orbital mechanics to a particularly slow child. She reached beneath the cot and pulled out a data slate, tossing it toward him. It landed at his feet with a soft thud. "You were unconscious for 3 days after the skirmish at the Salt Flats. Your ship went down. My medics pulled you from the wreckage. You were bleeding out. The ceasefire negotiations had stalled. Both our high councils were screaming for blood. Then someone, probably some overcaffeinated junior diplomat with a romantic streak, suggested a political union, a binding symbol of peace. And since you were the highest-ranking Terran officer within 100 clicks," she shrugged, the gesture elegant and infuriating. "Here we are." Riven stared at the slate. The screen displayed a formal document, stamped with the sigils of both the Terran Alliance and the Ketheri Dominion. At the bottom, 2 signatures glowed faintly. His own, shaky but unmistakable, and Sari's, bold and angular. Beneath them, in elegant script, marriage license and treaty of permanent ceasefire. The date was 3 days ago. The location, Field Command Post Theta, Salt Flats of Kara. "I was unconscious," Riven sputtered. "You can't sign a marriage contract for someone who's in a coma." "I didn't sign it for you," Sari said coolly, rising from the cot. She moved to a small field stove in the corner, pouring steaming liquid from a pot into 2 ceramic mugs. "You signed it yourself, just before you passed out. You were delirious, ranting about ending the bloodshed and honoring the fallen. You grabbed the slate from Ambassador Trell and scrawled your name with your own blood. Quite dramatic. Very human." She handed him a mug. The liquid inside was dark and fragrant, smelling of roasted nuts and something earthy. "Drink. It'll help with the headache and the existential dread." Riven took the mug automatically, his mind reeling. Married. To her. The woman who'd ordered the orbital bombardment that vaporized Fort Solace, where his best friend, Lieutenant Marachan, had been stationed. The woman whose fleet had chased his squadron across 3 systems, picking them off like target drones. And now, husband? The word felt alien on his tongue, absurd and terrifying. He looked at her, really looked, up close, He could see the fine lines around her eyes, the exhaustion etched into the set of her shoulders. She wasn't just a symbol of the enemy. She was a person who'd just made him coffee in the middle of a war zone. Why? He asked, his voice rough. Why agree to this? You could have just executed me, or held me for ransom. Saris leaned against the tent pole, cradling her own mug. Outside, the wind howled, whipping sand against the canvas. Because I'm tired, Riven Voss, she said, the formality dropping for a moment, revealing something raw beneath. Tired of counting the dead. Tired of explaining to mothers why their children won't come home. Tired of watching good soldiers, Ketheri and Terran, die over rocks and dust neither of us truly wants. She met his gaze, her storm-gray eyes holding his without flinching. This war is a waste. A stupid, bloody waste. If binding my life to yours stops even one more battle, then it's worth the indignity of sharing a tent with a human who smells like engine grease and despair. Riven flinched. He did smell like engine grease and despair. He hadn't bathed in days. But her words, they resonated in a place he'd tried to wall off. He'd seen the waste too. The hollow-eyed recruits shipped straight from basic training to meat grinders like Xylos. The reports of civilian colonies caught in crossfire. He'd signed orders that sent friends to their deaths, all for the sake of lines on a star chart that shifted with every political wind. Was this a marriage? Really so different from those orders? A desperate gamble for peace? Before he could formulate a response, the tent flap burst open. A Ketheri soldier, tall, silver-skinned, with eyes like chips of obsidian, stood rigidly in the entrance. General Val, Commander Voss, apologies for the intrusion, but there's been an incident at the eastern perimeter. Patrol Delta reports Terran scout drones violating the ceasefire line. They're demanding you both come immediately. Saris's expression hardened, the weary woman vanishing, replaced by the ice-cold general. Terran drones? Are they armed? The patrol disabled them, but one carried a data core. Encrypted. Human encryption. Riven's blood ran cold. Terran drones? Here? Now? The ceasefire was barely hours old. This had to be a rogue element. Or sabotage. He looked at Saris. Her gaze was already on him, sharp and assessing. The unspoken question hung between them. Is this your people breaking the peace? Show us, Saris ordered, striding past the soldier. She paused at the entrance, looking back at Riven. Husband, try not to trip over your own boots on the way. The walk to the eastern perimeter was short but tense. The Ketheri camp sprawled across the dunes, a maze of sand-colored tents, humming energy shields, and parked skimmers. Ketheri soldiers, pale-skinned like Saris or silver like the guard, all with hair in shades of white, gold, or platinum, watched them pass with unreadable expressions. Riven felt every eye on him, the lone human in a sea of aliens. He kept his posture straight, his face neutral, but his mind raced. Who would send drones? A Terran hardliner faction? A Ketheri false flag operation to frame the humans? The implications were catastrophic. If this breach was confirmed as Terran aggression, the fragile ceasefire, and his absurd marriage would shatter before it truly began. At the perimeter, a small crowd had gathered around a smoking crater. 2 disabled Terran scout drones, no bigger than dogs, lay half buried in the sand, their sensor arrays shattered. Kneeling beside them was a Ketheri tech, her fingers flying over a holographic interface projected from the retrieved data core. She looked up as Saris approached. General, the encryption is unusual, not standard Terran military protocol. It's layered, adaptive, almost organic. Riven frowned. Organic encryption? That's not Terran tech. We don't have anything like that. He stepped closer, ignoring the wary glances from the Ketheri soldiers. Let me see. The tech hesitated, looking to Saris. The general gave a curt nod. Riven crouched beside the core, his eyes scanning the flickering symbols. They were Terran alphanumeric, yes, but twisted, flowing in patterns that made his head ache. Then he saw it, a tiny, almost invisible sigil embedded in the code's root structure. A stylized serpent coiled around a double helix. His breath caught. Biosynth, he whispered. Saris knelt beside him. Biosynth. A black market bioengineering conglomerate, Riven explained, his voice tight. They sell weapons, tech, genetic mods, to anyone with credits. Humans, Ketheri, independents. They're not loyal to anyone but profit. If they're involved, he didn't need to finish. If Biosynth was arming both sides or provoking conflict to sell more weapons, they were the true enemy. Saris's eyes narrowed. Can you break the encryption? Riven shook his head. Not here. Not without a proper lab. But I know someone who might be able to. Dr. Eris Thorne. He used to work for Biosynth before he defected. He's complicated. But he knows their systems inside out. Where is he? Last I heard, he was hiding out in the Rust Belt asteroid colonies. Neutral territory. Saris stood, her decision made in an instant. Then that's where we're going. Prepare a fast courier ship. Minimal crew. Human and Ketheri. We leave within the hour. Riven stared at her. You're coming with me? Into neutral space? With me. You're my husband, she said, as if it were the most logical thing in the universe. And Biosynth threatens the peace we just bought with our names. Besides, she added, a ghost of a smirk touching her lips, I wouldn't trust you to find Thorne without getting yourself captured or killed. You have a habit of crashing ships. The journey to the Rust Belt was a study in awkward coexistence. The courier ship, the Whisper, was small and utilitarian, designed for speed, not comfort. Riven and Saris shared the cramped command deck, their movements careful to avoid brushing against each other. The silence was thick, broken only by the hum of the engines and the occasional terse exchange about coordinates or sensor readings. Riven found himself stealing glances at her. The way she handled the controls with precise economical movements. The way she'd stare out the viewport at the swirling nebulae. Her expression unreadable. She was nothing like the monster he'd imagined. She was focused, driven, and undeniably competent. On the third day, during a routine systems check, Riven found her in the tiny galley, attempting to reheat a nutrient paste packet. She was scowling at the malfunctioning heater unit. Stupid Terran appliance, she muttered, poking it with a stylus. It's not Terran, Riven said, leaning in the doorway. It's a Ketheri model. Standard issue for mixed crew vessels. Saris looked up, startled, then scowled harder. It's still stupid. Riven couldn't help it. He laughed. A real, genuine laugh that startled them both. Saris blinked. Then, slowly, the corner of her mouth twitched. What's so funny, husband? You, he said, stepping into the galley. The great General Saris Val, conqueror of Xylos, brought low by a faulty heater. He took the packet from her, his fingers brushing hers. A spark, literal and figurative, jumped between them. He ignored it, fiddling with the unit's access panel. Here, you have to tap the thermal regulator 3 times. Like this. He demonstrated. The heater hummed to life. See? Not so stupid. Saris watched him, her storm-gray eyes thoughtful. You know a lot about Ketheri appliances. I've salvaged enough of your wrecked skimmers, he said, handing her the now warm packet. You learn things. She took it, their fingers touching again. This time, neither pulled away immediately. The air in the tiny galley felt charged, thick with unspoken things, the absurdity of their situation, the weight of their people's hatred, the fragile thread of something else beginning to weave between them. Riven cleared his throat, stepping back. We'll reach the Rust Belt in 6 hours. Thorne's last known location is a derelict mining station called Persephone's Lament. It's not exactly welcoming. Nothing worth finding ever is, Saris said, her voice softer now. She took a bite of the paste, then made a face. Ugh, tastes like recycled regret. Riven grinned. Welcome to Terran cuisine. Persephone's Lament lived up to its name. A skeletal hulk of corroded metal hanging in the void. It spun slowly, casting long, jagged shadows. Sensor scans showed minimal power signatures and no life signs beyond the station's failing environmental systems. It was the perfect place for a paranoid defector to hide. Riven piloted the Whisper into a crumbling docking bay, the magnetic clamps groaning as they engaged. The airlock hissed open, revealing a dark, debris-strewn corridor. The air inside was stale and cold, smelling of ozone and decay. Charming, Saris murmured, activating the wrist-mounted light on her combat gauntlet. Her other hand rested on the hilt of her plasma blade. They moved cautiously through the station, Riven leading, his pulse rifle held ready. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the creak of stressed metal and the skittering of unseen things in the walls. Riven's comms crackled. This is Voss. Anyone here? Eris Thorne? We're not here to hurt you. We need your help. No answer. They found the lab in the station's core. It was a chaotic mess of humming servers, bubbling vats of glowing liquid, and holographic displays showing complex genetic sequences. And in the center of it all, hunched over a console, was a man, gaunt, with wild, greasy hair and eyes that darted like trapped birds. He whirled around as they entered, a neural disruptor pistol trembling in his hand. "Stay back!" he shrieked, his voice raw. "I know what you are. Ketheri spies. Sent to extract my brain." "It's me, Eris," Riven said, lowering his rifle slightly. "Riven Voss. Remember? You patched up my cybernetic arm after the Ganymede raid." Thorn squinted, his eyes focusing slowly. "Voss? But you're with her." He pointed the pistol at Saris, his hand shaking violently. "The Butcher of Xylos." Saris didn't flinch. "I prefer General," she said coolly. "And I'm here because Biosynth is using your old encryption protocols to sabotage the Terran Ketheri ceasefire. We need you to decode a data core." Thorn's eyes widened. "Biosynth? They wouldn't dare. Not after what they did to me." He lowered the pistol slightly, his paranoia warring with a flicker of professional curiosity. "What do you have?" Riven tossed him the data core. Thorn caught it, his fingers flying over its surface. His eyes glazed over as he interfaced with it mentally, his neural implants glowing faintly blue. Minutes stretched. The only sound was the hum of the lab equipment and Thorn's ragged breathing. Finally, he gasped, stumbling back as if struck. "Oh, stars!" he whispered, his face ashen. "It's worse than I thought. It's not just drones. It's a bioagent, a tailored pathogen, designed to be dormant in Ketheri physiology but hyperlethal to humans. And vice versa. They're planning to release it simultaneously in major population centers on both sides. Frame each other for the outbreak. The war wouldn't just restart. It would become an extinction-level event." Riven felt the blood drain from his face. Saris went utterly still, her expression turning to ice. "When?" she demanded. "Within 48 hours," Thorn said, his voice trembling. "The dispersal units are already in place, hidden in cargo shipments. The core contains the activation codes and the locations." "Can you stop it?" Riven asked. Thorn shook his head. "Not from here. The signal needs to be jammed at the source." "And the source?" "It's Biosynth's primary research facility, on Viridian Prime." Saris and Riven exchanged a look. Viridian Prime was deep in contested space, heavily fortified, a fortress world. Infiltrating it was suicide, but letting the pathogen release was genocide. "There's one other thing," Thorn said, his voice dropping to a whisper. He pulled up a hologram. It showed a complex molecular structure, pulsing with a sickly green light. "The pathogen, it has a unique signature. It bonds to a specific genetic marker, a marker found only in high-ranking military bloodlines. On both sides." Riven's stomach clenched. "You mean?" "Yes," Thorn said grimly. "It's designed to target you, specifically, and her. The marriage, it wasn't just a symbol. It was a test, to see if the pathogen could bridge the genetic gap between your species. Your union, it might have accelerated their timeline." The weight of it crashed down on Riven. Their marriage, this absurd, forced union, wasn't just a political tool. It was a key in Biosynth's monstrous plan, and they were walking right into the heart of it. Sari stepped forward, her voice cutting through the dread like a laser. "Then we go to Viridian Prime. We stop this. Together." Riven looked at her, this alien woman he was bound to by treaty and, increasingly, by something deeper. He saw not the enemy general but a partner, a warrior, his wife. He nodded, a fierce determination replacing the fear. Together, as they turned to leave the lab, Thorn called after them, his voice urgent. "There's one more thing. The pathogen, it has a failsafe. If the primary activation is stopped, it triggers a secondary protocol. A neural pulse. It'll fry every implanted comms unit, every neural interface, in both our fleets. Simultaneously, it'll blind us, deafen us, leave us helpless." Saris paused at the door, her silhouette sharp against the dim corridor light. "Then we'll have to move fast, and we'll have to do it the old-fashioned way." She looked at Riven, a fierce, almost feral light in her storm-gray eyes. "No comms, no fancy tech. Just you, me, and whatever we can carry." Riven checked the power cell on his rifle, the familiar weight a small comfort. "Sounds like a date." Outside the lab, the derelict station groaned around them, a tomb adrift in the void. But inside Riven, Something new was igniting. A fire forged in the crucible of impossible circumstances. He wasn't just Commander Riven Voss, Terran officer, anymore. He was husband to a Kethri general. And together, they would tear Biosynth's nightmare apart, or die trying. The path ahead was dark and fraught with peril, but for the first time in years, Riven didn't feel alone. He glanced at Saris, her golden hair catching the dim emergency lights, her pale skin seeming to glow with inner resolve. She met his gaze, and for a fleeting second, the mask of the general slipped, revealing the woman beneath. Scared, determined, and fiercely alive. The war wasn't over. It had just changed shape, and their strange, forced marriage had become the unlikely shield their peoples needed. The Whisper awaited in the docking bay, a tiny speck of hope against the vast, uncaring dark. They had a fortress to storm, a plague to stop, and a future to fight for. One that neither of them had asked for, but both were now willing to die to protect. The desert tent felt like a lifetime ago, a strange dream before the real battle began. Now, there was only the mission, the alliance, and the unspoken understanding growing between them, stronger than any treaty, forged in the fires of shared purpose and the terrifying, exhilarating possibility of something more. The jump to Viridian Prime was a nightmare wrapped in static. The Whisper shuddered violently as it tore through the quantum slipstream, alarms blaring as proximity warnings flared across the console. Biosynth's orbital defenses were active, scanning, hunting. Riven wrestled with the controls, sweat beading on his forehead, while Saris monitored the rear sensors, her jaw clenched tight. They disabled all non-essential systems to reduce their signature, flying dark and silent like a ghost through a graveyard of warships and automated turrets. 3 interceptors peeling off from the main fleet, Saris said, her voice calm despite the tension coiling in the cramped cockpit. They've spotted us. Not if I can help it, Riven muttered, yanking the yoke hard to port. The ship groaned in protest, diving into the shadow of a derelict freighter tumbling end over end in low orbit. The interceptors overshot, their plasma cannons searing empty space. Hold on. He triggered the emergency thrusters, sending the Whisper spiraling toward Viridian's upper atmosphere in a controlled freefall. Fire bloomed along the hull as friction ignited the air, the viewport glowing red-hot. Saris gripped her harness, her knuckles white, but her eyes never left the tactical display. Atmospheric entry in 10-9. They hit the cloud layer like a meteor. Rain lashed the viewport, thick and acidic, eating at the ship's ablative coating. Below, the planet unfolded. A nightmare of gleaming black spires and pulsing bioluminescent towers, all connected by veins of glowing conduits that throbbed like arteries. Biosynth's citadel rose at the center, a twisted ziggurat of chrome and organic matter, its peak wreathed in storm clouds crackling with unnatural lightning. We can't land near the citadel, Riven said, scanning for a drop point. Too many eyes. There. Saris pointed to a crumbling industrial sector on the city's edge, rusted refineries, collapsed walkways, and the skeletal remains of old transport lines. Abandoned. Minimal thermal signatures. Riven guided the Whisper down through a canyon of decaying structures, landing with a bone-jarring thud in a flooded maintenance yard. Steam hissed from ruptured pipes, and the air reeked of chemicals and decay. They suited up quickly, lightweight infiltration gear, sidearms, and neural scramblers to mask their biosignatures. No comms, no backup, just each other. The city was eerily quiet. No civilians, no patrols, just the hum of distant machinery and the drip of toxic rain. They moved like shadows through the ruins, Riven taking point, Saris covering their six. Every sense was on high alert. This silence wasn't peace, it was the calm before the storm. They reached the outer perimeter of the citadel through a network of corroded service tunnels. At the entrance, a massive biolocked gate pulsing with green light, Saris produced a small device Thorn had given them, a genetic key forged from stolen biosynth command codes. She pressed it to the lock. The gate shuddered, then slid open with a wet, organic sigh. Inside, the citadel was alive. Walls pulsed with muscle-like tissue. Floors shifted subtly underfoot. Bioluminescent fungi cast an eerie glow over corridors lined with containment pods. Some empty, others holding twisted, half-formed creatures suspended in amber fluid. Riven's stomach turned. This wasn't just a lab. It was a factory of nightmares. They found the central control nexus 3 levels down. A vast chamber dominated by a floating dais where the activation console hovered, surrounded by writhing tendrils of data cable that fed into the walls. And standing before it, arms crossed, was a figure in a pristine white biosynth command uniform. He turned as they entered. Riven froze. The man had Riven's face. Not similar. Identical. Same sharp jaw, same scar above the left eyebrow from a training accident on Luna, same storm gray eyes, except these held a cold, calculating malice. He smiled, and it was Riven's smile, twisted into something cruel. "Hello, brother," the man said. His voice a perfect mimicry of Riven's, but smoother, colder. Sari stepped in front of Riven, her plasma blade humming to life. "What is this?" "Project Echo," the doppelganger said, spreading his arms. "Biosynthe's masterstroke. A genetic twin, grown from Commander Voss's DNA recovered from the Xylos debris field. Enhanced, optimized, programmed to understand Terran and Kethri psychology perfectly. I am the ideal mediator, or the perfect weapon." Riven's mind reeled. A clone. Not just any clone. A weaponized echo of himself, designed to infiltrate, manipulate, and destroy from within. "You're the one who sent the drones. You framed us." "Not just framed," Echo said, his smile widening. "I orchestrated the entire ceasefire. I whispered in the ears of diplomats on both sides, suggesting the marriage as the ultimate symbol of unity. I knew they'd send you, Riven, the only Terran high-ranking enough, desperate enough. And I knew they'd send her." He nodded at Sari's. "The perfect pair. Your union provided the final genetic data we needed to stabilize the pathogen. You didn't just sign a treaty. You signed your people's death warrants." Sari's blade flared brighter. "You won't activate it." "Oh, but I already have," Echo said softly. A low thrum filled the chamber. The walls pulsed faster. On the console, a timer appeared. 15 minutes. "The dispersal sequence is irreversible," Echo said. "In 15 minutes, aerosolized vectors will launch from hidden silos across both Terran and Kethri core worlds. The pathogen will spread through ventilation systems, water supplies, even skin contact. Within hours, your species will turn on each other in fevered paranoia, blaming the other for the outbreak. And when your fleets are blind from the neural pulse, Biosynth will step in as saviors. We'll rebuild the galaxy in our image." Riven's blood ran cold. Thorn didn't mention a timer. "Because Thorn doesn't know everything," Echo sneered. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a galaxy to inherit." He turned toward the console. Sari's moved like lightning, her blade arcing toward his neck, but Echo was faster. He spun, drawing a monomolecular whip from his sleeve. It lashed out, slicing through Sari's forearm. She cried out, stumbling back, blood, pale silver, dripping onto the floor. Riven fired. Pulse rounds sparked against an energy shield that flared around Echo. "You think I wouldn't anticipate your moves, brother?" Echo laughed. "I am you. I know every instinct, every hesitation." Riven charged, not with his rifle, but with his body, tackling Echo away from the console. They crashed into a bank of organic servers, tendrils snapping and spraying acidic fluid. They grappled, fist against fist, mirror against mirror. Riven landed a solid punch to Echo's jaw, but Echo grinned through the blood. "You can't win," Echo hissed. "I know your weaknesses, your guilt over Marachin, your fear of failing your people, your growing feelings for her." He jerked his head toward Sari's, who was struggling to her feet, clutching her wounded arm. "You're distracted, and distraction is death." He headbutt Riven, stunning him, then rolled away, sprinting for the console. The timer read 10 minutes and 22 seconds. Sari's raised her blade, but her hand trembled. The wound was deep. Riven pushed himself up, his vision swimming. He couldn't let Echo reach that console. But how do you stop a man who knows your every move? Then he remembered something Thorn had said. The pathogen bonds to high-ranking bloodlines, but it has a failsafe. Failsafe. Not just the neural pulse, but something else. Something in the code. "Sari's," Riven shouted. "The genetic key. Use it on the console." She understood instantly. Ignoring the pain, she hurled the small device toward the floating dais. It struck the console and embedded itself with a wet thunk. The screen flickered. New lines of code scrolled rapidly. Echo snarled, changing direction mid-stride. "No!" He lunged for the key, but Riven intercepted him again, this time using Echo's own tactics against him. Feinting left, then driving a knee into his ribs. Echo gasped, but retaliated with a brutal elbow to Riven's temple. Stars exploded behind Riven's eyes, but he held on, wrapping his arms around Echo's waist and driving him backward into a cluster of pulsating biotanks. Glass shattered. Thick, viscous fluid poured out, carrying with it half-formed creatures that writhed and shrieked. One latched onto Echo's leg, its needle teeth sinking deep. He screamed, kicking it off, but the damage was done. His movements slowed, his face contorted in pain. On the console, the timer froze at 3 minutes and 17 seconds. "It's working," Saris cried, limping forward. "The key is rewriting the dispersal protocol." But Echo wasn't done. With a roar of fury, he ripped a power conduit from the wall, sending sparks flying. He jammed it into the console's core. "If I can't have control, then no one will." The chamber lights died. Emergency red strobes flashed. The timer vanished, replaced by a new message. "Neural pulse imminent. T-minus 60 seconds. "No!" Saris rushed to the console, her fingers flying over the interface, trying to override it. But without Thorn's decryption algorithms, it was hopeless. Riven staggered to his feet, blood dripping from his brow. He looked at Echo, writhing on the floor, half consumed by the biomutants. He looked at Saris, pale and bleeding, fighting a system designed to outthink them. And he made a decision. He ran not to the console, but to the main power conduit feeding the neural pulse emitter, a massive organic coil embedded in the ceiling. "Riven, what are you doing?" Saris yelled. "What I do best," he called back, drawing his combat knife. "Crashing something." He leaped onto a support strut, climbing toward the coil. Below, Echo laughed weakly. "You'll fry yourself. The feedback will liquefy your brain." "Maybe," Riven grunted, jamming the knife into the pulsing core. "But I won't be alone." He looked down at Saris. Their eyes met, storm gray, and in that moment, everything was said without words. Trust, regret, hope. He twisted the blade. Light exploded. Not fire, but pure, blinding energy. It surged through the conduit, arcing through the chamber. Riven screamed as it tore through him, but he held on, channeling the overload into the emitter core. The neural pulse sequence stuttered, warped, then imploded in on itself with a deafening crack. Silence. The red lights died. The chamber went dark except for the faint glow of dying bioluminescence. Riven fell. He hit the floor hard, his body numb, his vision tunneling. He could hear Saris calling his name, her voice raw with panic. Hands, cold, pale, trembling, gripped his shoulders. "Riven, stay with me." He tried to speak, but only blood came out. He could feel his systems failing. The feedback had been worse than he imagined. Then, through the haze, he saw Echo crawling toward them, one arm dragging, his face a mask of blood and fury. "You ruined everything." Saris stood, her wounded arm hanging uselessly, but her good hand gripped her plasma blade. She didn't hesitate. With a cry that was part grief, part fury, she brought the blade down. Echo's head hit the floor with a wet thud. His body twitched once, then stilled. Saris dropped to her knees beside Riven, cradling his head in her lap. Her tears, silver, like her blood, fell onto his face. "Don't you dare die on me, husband," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Not after all this." Riven tried to smile. He reached up, his fingers brushing a strand of her golden hair. "Felt like sunlight. Didn't crash the ship," he managed. She let out a choked laugh. "No, you just tried to crash a planet." Outside, the storm over Viridian Prime began to break. The unnatural lightning faded. The Citadel's pulse slowed, as if the heart of the beast had been stilled. But in the distance, new lights appeared in the sky, dozens of them. Ships, not Terran, not Ketheri, Biosyntha's private fleet. They'd seen the energy surge. They were coming to investigate. Saris looked up, her expression hardening. She gently laid Riven down, then stood, retrieving her blade. She activated her wrist comm, miraculously still functional, and sent a single, encrypted burst into the void. "Persephone's Lament. Code Omega. All fleets. Mobilize. Biosynth is the enemy." It was a gamble. The ceasefire was fragile. But if Thorn received the message, if the Terran and Ketheri admirals trusted the word of a married pair, one human, one alien, they might just listen. She turned back to Riven. His breathing was shallow, but steady. He was alive, for now. Kneeling beside him again, She pressed her forehead to his. "Rest, my husband," she murmured. "I'll hold the line until you wake." And as the first biosynth gunships descended through the toxic clouds, General Sari's Val of the Ketheri Dominion stood alone in the ruined heart of a nightmare, blade in hand, guarding not just a man, but the fragile, impossible future they had forged together in blood, sacrifice, and the quiet, defiant act of choosing peace over war. Even when the universe demanded otherwise, the battle wasn't over. It had only just begun. But for the first time, they weren't fighting each other. They were fighting for each other. And that, in the end, might be enough. Weeks later, under twin suns that cast golden light over the rebuilt peace gardens of Kara, Riven Voss stood beside Sari's Val, not as commander and general, not as symbols of rival empires, but simply as husband and wife. The war was over. Biosynth had fallen, its leaders exposed, its weapons dismantled by a united Terran Ketheri task force forged in the fire of shared survival. Riven's cybernetic arm gleamed faintly in the sunlight, a gift from Ketheri engineers who'd worked alongside Terran medics to save him. Sari's silver scar had faded to a pale line, a quiet reminder of the day everything changed. Around them, children, human and Ketheri, played among flowering desert vines, their laughter weaving a new language of peace. No treaties were signed that day. No speeches were made. Only a quiet walk hand in hand, fingers entwined, past blooming night jasmine and the soft hum of a world learning to heal. They had not chosen this path, but they had chosen each other. And in that choice, against all odds, they found not just an end to war, but the beginning of something far more rare. A future built not on conquest, but on trust, tenderness, and the quiet certainty that love, even the strangest kind, could be the strongest weapon of all.